Well, Richard Rossi is an Academy Award considered filmmaker and Kelly Tabor is a retired school teacher. They've co-written a children's series and soon-to-be feature film, Lucy and the Lake Monster, which masterfully illustrates how to overcome mental health challenges like worry, depression and anxiety with childlike faith. And Richard and Kelly are on the line with us. How are you both doing?
Wonderful, thank you.
Good, thank you. Great to be with you, Toby.
Yes, it's great to have you both here. So in this book, Lucy Lago is a 9-year-old orphan who believes that Champ, the Lake Champlain sea serpent, lives and lurks in the lake by her cabin in Crown Point. She lives there with her grandpa, who she calls Papa. So what actually inspired this story? Because it sounds like it comes from somewhere.
Yes, well, Kelly did grow up in this area and was looking for the plesiosaur champ as a little girl. So maybe, Kelly, you could answer that from your childhood. I mean, we've been friends for nearly 40 years, and I'm a filmmaker and novelist and decided to bring it to the book and to the film, Lucy and the Lake Monster, with her. But Kelly, it really originates with you as the muse and the catalyst from your childhood.
Yes, I grew up on Lake Champlain, and all my life I've looked for Champ whenever I was here in New York. My dad had a cabin that was on Lake Champlain, so every morning I'd wake up and my eyes would always be scanning the lake, and whenever we were driving along the lake shores or on the beaches, I'd always look, and I'd always heard stories about sightings because Boaga Bay, where I'm close to, is where most of the sightings have been seen. Over 300 eyewitnesses on one sighting sign alone in the town of Fort Henry. People's names are listed, the dates are listed. I've got an uncle that's on the sign, and I've got other relatives that have seen it also, but they're not on the sign. But anyways, it was just always exciting. And so as a school teacher, I always told my students stories about the Lake Champlain monster. And I taught down in South Carolina for the majority of my teaching years. And all the kids down there all are familiar with the Lake Champlain monster because I've always told them stories. And I've had kids even write me who've gone, I taught fourth grade for the most of the time. And most of the kids have gone on, some have married. And I still hear back from some kids asking, do you still tell the stories about the Lake Champlain monster? And so I thought, this is great. And so I made Richard aware of it. And so he's the one that brought up the idea, well, how would you like to co-write a children's series with me? I was like, really? That would be great, because I love to write. And so here we are. We've written the first book of the series, and we've got a film in the making. So I'm thrilled.
And Richard, being a filmmaker, when you co-write a book or even write a book, are you quite good at making it visually good? You're able to picture it in your head.
Yes, Toby. Yeah, we wrote the novel first and tried to visualize it cinematically, and then we shot the novel. It's actually in the can filmed. We filmed this summer up in New York, right by the lake. So it's in post-production right now. And so it's there's a saying that a movie's written 3 times. First, when you actually write the story, which we did in the book and screenplay. Yeah. Second, you film it and decide what, and how to film it. But thirdly, when the post-production, the editing, and we're editing right now, have it about 1/3 of the first cut done, about 40 minutes, actually probably more than a third done. Wow. So next summer it'll be coming out into theaters, and for updates, they could be checking our social media and website. It's lucyandthelakemonster.com. Oh, the book, by the way, too, it is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble for people that would like to read Lucy and the Lake Monster.
And it's quite uncommon for a film adaptation to happen so quickly, isn't it? So was this planned from the outset?
Yes, that's a really good point. It's moved really quick. We've had a vision from the film from the outset. Even as we were writing the novel, we were auditioning hundreds and hundreds of young little girls for this part of Lucy. She's is she 8 or 9? Is she 8 or 9 in the story, Kelly? I think she turns 9 and has a birthday in the story. But this is Emma Pearson. She plays Lucy. She won the role in beating out hundreds of other wonderful young actresses. So she did a great job, and I think we had the vision for the film from the beginning.
Yeah. What made you want to write a book, Richard, being a filmmaker? Why didn't you want to go straight to the film?
Oh, that's a good question. I almost died last year. I was in the hospital for a big portion of last year and had several surgeries. And I always had this bucket list of wanting to do hopefully a children's classic. I hope that doesn't sound egotistical, but at least as a goal, something that children would like, but it be like well written enough that adults would love it too, which we're very gratified. A lot of adults in their reviews say I couldn't put it down. But I played in them as an actor. I'm a working actor in a musical about Alice in Wonderland. And the subject of the musical was the writer and how he wrote it, which was Lewis Carroll. Which was the pen name for a minister named Reverend Charles Dodson. So I played Lewis Carroll and in the musical, and how I create this story about this little girl. And, I'd made 3 feature dramatic films before that I wrote and directed, but I kept gnawing in the back of my mind since that musical. I'd like to do something for children that would be just a beautiful film. And thankfully, I had a wonderful surgeon and came through my surgeries. But to make a long story short, it was like God gave me another year. And so I thought, I want to do this children's book. And Kelly's story is so perfect. And then lo and behold, I became a grandfather for the first time in real life also. And I did play the grandfather in the film, Papa. Uh-huh. So I'm grateful I got more time and was able to do something for children. And Kelly's a great writer and teacher, retired teacher. So she did tremendous job with co-writing and editing and picking out my numerous grammatical errors.
Yeah. Kelly, do you reckon you have a good idea of what children like and want, given that you're a former teacher?
Yes, and too, being a teacher, I know the struggles that kids go through because teaching all the years that I've taught, I've come across a lot of students along the way. So they struggle with, when some parents pass away sometimes, so or parents they're separated, so they're away from someone that they love, or it's a time of loss. Some of them struggle with anxiety and grief and, just those kinds of things. So when Lucy in the story faces these kind of issues, which are very common worldwide, we try to put in there ways for them to deal with situations like that. So a child of any age could be reading and then they could identify with some of the things that Lucy is facing. Bullying is another big problem in society, and not just with children, but in the adult world too, in some work situations. And so, we try to put in there different ways that they can deal with this sort of thing in a positive light, so that anybody that's reading it, maybe hopefully it can help them.
And what made you want to have that kind of mental health theme in the first place, as opposed to doing what most people would do and maybe just have the story on its own?
Oh, I know that there's a need with it too, especially too with COVID. We just went through all that mess, and there are a lot of needs out there, and so it's just not an exciting story. It's not just an adventurous, fictional story about a sea monster. We wanted to have some hidden gems in there too that would be helpful.
And do you believe in the monster in real life that you grew up near to?
Yes, definitely. I want to see it so bad. Even I'm visiting with my parents in upstate New York right now. And so I drive by the lake all the time, and I'm still looking. Even in my adulthood, I still look. And I think I might have seen the effects of Champ before. I've not seen him like other people have, but one time I was with some family at my dad's cabin on the lake, and it was the lake was very calm that evening. It looked like glass. It was very smooth, and we saw stirring not too far out. We're like, what is that? And my dad always had a pair of binoculars hanging there, so my friend had her camera ready to take the $1 million shot. And I was looking through the binoculars, and it was getting closer and closer, and it was making a wake. It was about an inch or so the wake, and it was a perfect V coming straight at us. It didn't go side to side or up and down. It was just coming in a straight line, and then it made like a 90-degree turn and went off to the next point across the bay, and it never surfaced. And so I'm thinking, what in the world? We wanted it to come up so badly, but I thought, what is big enough to make a wake that big and go in a straight line like that? So I don't really know, but I think it could have been maybe the effects of Champ. I like to believe that anyway.
And what about you, Richard? I don't think you grew up there too, but
no.
Are you skeptical of it?
I am probably the skeptic in the writing team, in the sense of there's a biblical story about the apostles seeing Christ risen, and they go to Thomas and they say, "We saw him. He's still alive. You know, he came back 3 days after they crucified him." And Thomas says, "Well, I haven't seen it. I need evidence unless I see him, and unless, you know, I can see the wounds in his side and his hands." And, you know, growing up, doubting Thomas was a negative thing that was put down. But I've actually changed my view of that type of approach, that it's a good thing to want evidence. And so, you know, I've liked to look really critically at the evidence. And on the sign, the Boaga Bay sign, some of the people I met that saw Champ said they were high or drunk, and, you know, others were a bit mentally off. But then there are some on the sign that are very credible, of the eyewitness sign. But for the story, I also see it. I'm very open-minded to it, and I love it, though. Since I was little, I always loved cryptozoology stories like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. And I've met and got to interview people that have seen Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster. And I look at it also like an archetype. I think hopefully good children's literature can be symbolic of other things. Like I look at Champ as an archetype for things. It could be an archetype for God. As an example, like Lucy is pure in heart. So she sees Champ as a friend and loving and a beautiful person, that a beautiful creature she can communicate with. But then there's these bad villains, Beazle, Beamish, and Mercenary Mike, and they say Champ's a monster and horrible. And I look at that like in religion, like some preachers will scare you that God's going to damn most of the world to hell and torture them unless you give me a donation. But then there's like, you know, benevolent people who see God as love and a heavenly Father who cares about us. So I think it can represent other things too, even if you don't literally believe in it.
Yeah. To talk about the film as well for just a second, you directed it, you co-wrote it, and you're starring in it. Was that quite hard to do so much?
Yeah, it's very hard to direct and act in something. But thankfully, having the vision, the whole vision in our heads. And also, Kelly was on set as an assistant director, and she knows the story inside out. So she thought of good things along the way from knowing the story. It's pretty tough, though. Like, I've acted in some other films I directed, and I tend to give more preference to the other actors. Like, I'll give them more takes and that sort of a thing. Whereas a lot of times when I've acted in my own films, I do my bits really quick because I have so many other things on my mind. Fortunately, sometimes your best take, though, is your first take, I've found, with acting and music. I'm a musician. And sometimes, for some reason, your first take, you're just good, you know, because you don't overthink it, you know?
Yeah.
And I've been in the recording studio where like a singer or guitar player, let me try that lead one more time. And they do it like 300 times. And then they go back and the first one was fine. You know?
Yeah, I think it is true, because on your first take, you don't expect to make a mistake. But when you've made mistakes 41 times previously, you think, I'm probably going to do it again.
Yeah, it's like a self-defeating cycle, really.
Yeah. What else is coming up for the next books in the series? What's the timescale there? And do you think they'll be converted into films as well?
Well, that's a great question. We are working on a sequel, and Kelly chastises me occasionally. Says, "Don't be putting up so many clips and giving away that's the future. You got to keep these stories more secret." But in the sequel, we already have a great things happening, and so people that read this book, several people that I met that wanted us to sign books, they said, "You got a sequel coming the way you ended this." They can kind of smell it because it ends with some questions and things like that. So, Kelly, do you have any comment on the sequel, or are you like the CIA guarding the secrets here about that?
Well, I like guarding the secrets, but I have a lot of good ideas in my mind. And whenever I give them to Richard, he always writes them down. He's real good at taking notes. Oh, I've got to write that down because we can't forget that. And so he's got an ongoing notebook of different scenes that we need to have.
Oh, and yes, we do want to make it into a film, Toby. You asked that also. Our leading lady, kids grow up fast, so we probably can't wait too long. We don't want them to grow up on us by the time we get to it. So
that's an important point. Well, in the meantime, where can we buy the book and also check out the film when it comes out?
Well, the book is for sale on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And
there's a hard
website.
copy as well. Here's a hard copy.
Oh, thanks,
Ooh.
Kelly. That hard copy is really nice. I don't have one of those. I'd like to get one of those. It's at the web for updates on the film. The website's lucyandthelake.monster.com. Facebook is facebook.com/champmovie, and Instagram and Twitter is champmoviehq. The HQ is for headquarters, and they could Google too. Lucy and the Lake Monster, Kelly Tabor, Richard Rossi. There's a lot of articles about it in the newspaper, and CBS has done a few reports on it. So you can keep Googling, and we're going to have it shown in theaters as well as streaming down the road and DVD and things like that. But we really like to be old school and get back to the theater where people can get a big bucket of hot butter popcorn and see the film.
Will it be in cinemas in the UK?
Absolutely, yes.
Yay.
And we want to come in person to the UK and do some screenings with Q&A and answer questions and sign books there. The UK has been so supportive, and I think the British are smarter as a whole than Americans, and
we like to think so.
Yeah, they have the UK. You have a history of really good literature, really good children's literature. I mean, you look at the classics of children's literature. Where do they come from? Alice in Wonderland, I mentioned earlier, Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. So many of the greatest books for children were British writers. Oh, by the way, where in the UK are you from, Toby?
Well, many thanks to both of you for coming on today. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, you too. God bless you. Thank you, Toby. You're a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day.